Hello world. So in this video, I'm going to refactor an Express router file. So if you watched my last video, how to build a full stack CRUD app with Express, Node, and Postgres, we did one router file, but we put all of our code into it. So in this video, I just want to take a second to clean that up a bit, pull some of the common functions out, and make it nice and reusable and fun. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is update my validations. One thing I noticed, if I go to to-do/1, that works. If I go to to-do/2, that works. If I go to to-do/what, that just breaks. And if we look at the error that we're getting, invalid input syntax for integer, ASDF. So my current validation for the ID is not correct. So I want to update that real quick. If we look at to-do, and we look at right here, this is where I'm doing the validation of the ID. So right here I'm saying if the ID is not undefined, then look it up in the database. But what I really need to be saying is if the ID is not nan, so is not nan, then look it up in the database, meaning ID must be a number. Otherwise, say invalid ID. So now that I've done that, right, so now when I go to something that doesn't exist, it actually says invalid ID. But if I go to like 3, then, well, is that empty? Oh, I might have deleted the one with ID 3. But if we go to /to-do, ID 2, ID, oh wow, ID 6, how did that happen? But we have updated our validation. That's really all I wanted to update, so I'm going to go ahead and check that one. Move common methods to the lib folder. So here's what we want to do. So things like maybe even our validations, so like this function, valid to do, I want to pull that function out so that I could potentially use it later. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a root level folder called shared. So eventually, probably in my next video, I'm going to create the exact same app, but instead of using server-side rendering, I'm going to use jQuery and a pure JSON API. But when I do that, I can actually reuse a lot of this code I've already written without touching this server folder. So what I'm going to do is in this folder, I'm just going to make a directory called lib at the root. And so that way I could have like multiple Express servers in this folder, and they could all read the same code from lib. Cool. So now in lib, I'm going to create a new file. I'll call it validations.js. And in here, that's where I'm going to bring that function into. So for one, let's just grab this function, valid to do. And now we want to make it available to the world. So we can say module.exports is equal to an object that has a valid to do property equal to the valid to do function. But now you'll notice in this file, valid to do is no longer defined. So what I need to do is bring it in. So here I can say const valid to do equals require. We are in the routes folder. So if we go up one directory, that puts us in the server folder. And if we go up one more directory, that puts us here. Then if we go into the lib directory and grab the validations file, that gives us this object. But now we want the valid to do property on it. So I've taken that function, put it in some separate file somewhere, but this should still work. So if we look at where valid to do is called, this is called when you're posting. So this function valid to do insert update redirect, which I should probably rename, but it verifies that the to do is valid, then does the thing. So let's try to create a do, and we should still see some validation. So let's say new to do. And let's pull up our server logs. To do refactor. Description, refactoring is fun. Priority 1, create. So that still worked, it was valid, but let's try to make an invalid one. New to do, I'm just gonna leave the title blank. What happens? invalid to do. So our validations are still working even though I moved it out to a separate file. I think that's one of the key things about refactoring is you need to keep testing your app as you pull functions out and make sure that things are still working, even though, because right now we're just moving code around. Like, it should behave exactly the same way. We're just cleaning things up. So keep checking that things are working. What else can I pull out? Potentially even these, like, the respond and render. I don't know. One thing I want to do right now while I'm in here is this function. If you go back and watch my last video, like, I changed this function, I never updated the name. So what this function is doing is, given a request or a response, it's going to validate that there is a valid to do in the request body, create a basic valid to do using that information, and then pass that to do into a callback function that you specify. If it was not a valid to do, it immediately renders the error page. So what this function should say is validate to do, not insert update redirect, so validate to do render error. So that's what it's really doing. Let's update all the places that call it, just these two. And that should still work. So we should be testing the exact same thing because I'm still validating to do. So if I go to new to do and click create with no fields, I should still see invalid to do. But if I say rename functions and create that, that does work. So code is keep on working. I'm going to leave these in here for now. Maybe we'll come back and pull them out. But move common methods to the lib folder. Done for now. Move knex queries to the DB folder. So, quick break. So if we look at our routes, we have just plain old knex statements just right in the route. So select all the rows from the table, select select the rows where the ID is the given ID. Down here we have insert a to-do, we have update a row. So all of these things, that's potentially reusable logic. So instead of having these knex queries in the routes itself, I'm going to create a queries file and pull those queries into them. So in my DB folder, I am going to create a new file. I'm going to call it queries.js. And inside of here, this is where I'm going to make my queries. So obviously, because it's called queries. So module.exports, set that equal to an object. And what queries do I want? So let's look at our to-do. The very first one I have is this one, knex to-do select. So I am going to first, let's just totally get knex out of this to-do file. So now this to-do file can't even talk directly to the database. It needs to talk to queries. So now over here in queries, I'm going to bring in knex. And because queries is in the DB folder, I can just say /knex, so that brings that right in. But if we think about what is this query doing, this is getting all of the to-dos. So I'm going to create a queries function. So let's go ahead and bring in queries right here. So I'll say const queries equals require, go up one directory to the DB folder and grab the queries file. And now let's pull this out. So knex to do select. Instead of that, I want to say queries.get all. Easy as that. Do some little bit of indentation. So now let's go over here and create a function. We'll say function, not a function. We'll say get all. So a property on this object called get all that is a function. And actually, I can just use arrow functions. And this just returns knex to do select. So exactly what we just did, but now I'm returning it from a function. So now instead of having that raw knex query right in there, I've got this nice little queries variable. Let's see what happens. So I should be able to still be able to see the all to do page. Still works. Cool. If I go to 1, it's going to break because knex is not defined because we have to pull those queries out. So let's keep on keeping on. So this next query, select where ID is ID and get the first one. So I'm going to call this, I'm going to say queries dot get one, and then pass in that ID. So over here, I'm going to say get one. This is a function that takes in an ID, then returns that whole knex statement. Yeah, I'm going to do that. Okay, get one, pass in the ID, go there, do that good stuff. So now I should be able to show the single to-do page. So if I click on one, it still works. Cool. We're refactoring all day long. Let's find some more queries. This one. So this is create, right? So we're inserting a to-do. So let's cut this out. We'll say queries dot create, and then pass in the to-do, and then we should get back the ID. So down here, I'm going to say create. This is a function that accepts a to-do. It then returns the insertion. Oh, what happened? Yeah. It then returns the insertion of that to-do and returns its ID. So this was the create method. So let's make sure that still works. Go back over here. Go to our to-dos, create a new to-do. Let's just see if the validation is still working. Okay, we actually have to type something in. So our new to-do is to create queries. Yeah, it's a query to. And that still seems to work. It's there, cool. I think we have a couple more. So this one is update. So update by ID. So you'll notice right here I'm saying rec.params.id. I really only want to pass the ID into my queries file, so I'm going to go ahead and pull this into a variable. So let's say this is ID. We'll say const ID equals rec.params.id, and then I can use that there, and then I can use that there. But now I can create a function that just accepts, well, it's going to accept an ID and a to-do and update it. So I'll say queries update. I want to update the thing with that ID and use that information in that to-do to update it. So let's create that function. We'll say update. This is going to accept an ID and a to-do. We're then going to return that knex statement. And so go to the to-do table where the ID is equal to that and update it with the information in that. So looks good. Let's try it out. So over here, if I go to create queries and I try to update it, create queries all day. Still works. Moving right along. And I believe this is our last query. So this is delete by ID. So we'll say queries delete and pass in the ID. It will return that knex query. And this is looking good. Isn't this nice? I got all my knex queries all in one place. They have beautiful names that I can call them by. And now this thing is like really reusable. Yeah, cool. But let's try to delete. It should still work. So if we go over here and say rename functions and just delete it, it's gone. Cool. Yeah. I believe that is all of our queries. What else do we have? Create reusable function to send the error response. Yeah, so what I was noticing is if we look at like this function, it sets the status to 500, renders the error page with that message. And then I think I do that again here. So set status 500, render the error page with that message. And then do I do it again somewhere? Yeah, set the status to 500, render the error page with a message. So that should probably be a function. Let's do this. So in my lib folder, I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to say response helpers. So I'm going to create a function that says set status render error. And that is going to take in a status code and the message to render. But I guess we're also going to need the response so that we can actually render the error. So what this function should do is basically this. So if I take this in, so it should say res set the status to this status code, and then set the error message equal to the message. So I can use object literal syntax. That's an object with a property called message equal to that value message. And then let's export this. So module.exports, that is an object that has a set status render error method. And then we will bring that function or method into here. So set status render error, that's going to be this path, but not validations. We want response helpers. And now I can use this. So here I'm going to say set status render error 500. So pass in the response. 500 in our message is invalid ID. Now, hey, we're removing duplicate code. Okay, so where else do we want to do that? Respond with an error. Invalid to do. Where else? Yeah, right here. Invalid ID. Okay, and actually, I need to update this validation as well. So earlier when we were getting by ID, here, we're saying isNaN. I need to do that same thing. Actually, let's turn this into a function though, so that way I can use it in both places. So instead of valid to do, I'll say function valid ID. That takes in the ID and just returns there's not nan. And then we will export it so it's available to the world. We will then go in here and bring it in. So valid ID, and now we can use it. So if valid ID, do the thing. If valid ID, do the thing. And I should still be able to get by ID. Yes, I can. And delete by ID. Fantastic. Let's do like one last once over of this file and see if we're happy with it and we want to keep moving on. So we have our /route that returns all of the to-dos. We have our respond and render function. Yeah. I mean, I kind of want to take both of these functions out, like the validate to do render error and the respond and render to do. Yeah, so I'm going to create, yeah, the thing is, if I take both of those functions out, then that function itself is going to need to require the queries, which may or may not be a bad thing, but it also needs to require the validations. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to move both of these functions to the bottom of this file, and then this file will be a little bit easier to navigate because it won't be clouded with functions. It's just route handlers. So throw those functions there. And now if we look at our route file, it's looking pretty clean. So respond and render to do for get/id, validate the to do, and then render an error, or redirect to the page. We can update, we can delete. Yeah, this is looking good to me. And then we have those functions down there that are potentially reusable, but I'm just going to go ahead and remove that console log. Cool. I am feeling happy with this. This is just like a basic refactoring. And yeah, so try to do the same thing with your route files. Like, the idea is you want to keep them simple. So like a request handler should not have lots and lots of logic in it. It should be using other functions that do the dirty work and then just rendering and responding to the to the client, to the thing that made the request. And so that's what our routes are doing. So we call some other function, render a view. We call some other functions, do a redirect. We call some other functions, then do a redirect. Call some other functions, then like render a view. So this is looking good to me. I will check the box. See you next time. Have a great day.